Hey everybody, how you doing? It's Crime and Cask cover burger to you again. We got a little Swamp Justice Radio. We're already into season 2. This is episode 6. Can you believe it? Time is flying by. We're talking about all things Alex Murdaugh. We're talking about Union County, South Carolina. Good Lord. But we are on WVFF, which is 97.7 FM. WVFF, Veterans for Freedom Radio, the Truth in Broadcasting Corporation, coming to you live out of Cottageville, South Kakalaki. And last week we had a special guest. I'm going to turn this music down a little bit. Last week we had a special guest here from Super Woke News over on X, which used to be called Twitter, which was the illustrious Elaine Greenwood. We'll just bring her back on from the stage and look at her.
Jim, thank you for having me back. You know, that illustrious Elaine Greenwood, it just gets my blood pressure going.
That's why I say it.
I know. So how you doing, Jim? Tell me what's going on. You got an article you published yesterday. Tell me about it. Talk to me.
Before I get into that, it has to do with that guy that's on the T-shirt to your, I guess that's your left.
When I had the YouTube channel, one of my viewers sent this in, and they wanted me to wear it. There were a lot of people in my channel that wanted me to be at the trial, and they wanted me to wear that at the trial. Anyway, I cherish it now. At the time, it was just everything behind me was these are some of the dogs and horses that we bred, but I had a lot of props with that channel. And some of these people are so dear to me. And for anybody that might see this, that was ever a source for me, I would urge you now to contact Jim. Jim, raise your hand so they know which one of you is Jim. Okay, contact him, because I realize now that there were people that contacted me that had a lot of very important information that at the time I either didn't understand. I didn't understand the importance of it, or it was an aspect of the story I wasn't comfortable reporting about. And there are one or two in particular that, Jim, I really think they would benefit from speaking to you, and you would benefit from hearing what they had to say, because you knew the follow-up questions to ask that at the time I didn't know.
Well, so the other day, and I appreciate that. Yeah, feel free, crimeandcask@gmail.com. You can email me or go to my website, crimeandcask.com or ccnewsnetwork.com. You can check it all out there. So the defense, I thought they were done, but honestly, and who knows when this thing's ever going to be done. I thought the defense was done, but they did file another brief this last week, and I got around to reading it. It was quite long, but
wait a minute. The defense in the Alex Murdaugh trial filed another brief with the appellate court that has to do with the appeal for the second trial?
Yeah, on November 5th with the South Carolina Supreme Court, it's the appeal from Colleton County. It's the final brief of the respondent.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Okay, yeah, because that's the process. Okay, I get it. So what did they say?
Well, let's get into it. Let me share the screen for you here. I don't know if you can see it, but this is the...
Can't read. See it.
Yeah, that's okay. This is the final brief, but we go into the deep dive. It's the latest filings with the South Carolina Supreme Court that pull the Alex Murdaugh trial back to its core question. Was this a lawful, reliable conviction or a verdict reached under the weight of speculation and possible outside influence? And who would that possible outside influence or influencers be?
Oh, gee. Can we think of anybody named, I don't want to get you sued, but yeah.
We all know who we're talking about. And it's, there's no way to maintain these convictions without overlooking both constitutional violations, which you are really good at, and the critical gaps in the evidence. So, I didn't go through the whole thing, but I went through, I think, what was some major things to go through here. And you can see it. The number one is the jury influenced by a court official
Yes.
is not harmless, as I wrote it. It is structural. And so the brief argues that the case can be resolved on one issue alone, and that is the alleged jury tampering by then Colleton County Clerk of Court Mary Rebecca Hill, or Becky Hill, or Becky Boo, depending on who you are.
Absolutely. Let's just save everybody a lot of time and the taxpayer a lot of money and get to the second trial right now, because that is an insurmountable obstacle for the prosecution. That is jury tampering, no question. Our United States Supreme Court is well decided on this point. Let's just go on to the second trial.
Well, yeah, it says when a court official injects comments or pressure that lean toward guilt, then prejudice is presumed, according to our United States Supreme Court. And the law treats that this is not just a mere trial error, as the state of South Carolina, as they said, was, what did they say? It was,
it's the 1954. There was actually a 54 to 56. It's Remmer v. U.S. Yes, 100%. So this is such well-established law. Let's just stop this nonsense. Really stop it and move on to the second trial. I don't think that they can, upon an accurate review of the evidence that they presented, and if you want a detailed analysis of that, there's a book. It's called Defending Alex Murdaugh. You may have heard of it, Jim. You can buy it at Barnes and Nobles, and there might even be a new updated version of that book. I've heard rumblings about that, but just as a factual matter, Alex Murdaugh did not kill Paul and Maggie. I think what we might want to pay attention to, what the audience might care about, is who did. And I think that you are very close. I think you have who did. I think what we've never really understood is why. And I think we do not even now totally understand all the players. And part of it is everybody was lying or prevaricating or being deceitful for whatever reasons. I mean, law enforcement can be deceitful, but we had a lot of people deceiving the public. And we need to unwind some of that, because I think that the truth is more interesting than the fake narrative spun by Hulu and Netflix and podcasters and other people. It's complex. Is that kind of your takeaway? It's more complex than we realized?
Well, the trial certainly is, but when we're talking about jury influence by a court official, I think Justice Toll called it fleeting and foolish. Were her comments, and the state of South Carolina has mirrored her exact words, fleeting and foolish. So they have agreed.
There's no court decision that allows for the fleeting and foolish exemption to Remmer.
Correct.
The jury was tampered with. Put a pin in that. Put a fork in it.
I think they did. They said, yes, she said those words, but they were fleeting and foolish and didn't affect the outcome of the verdict, which
you are not allowed to question the jurors the way Justice Toll did. It is specifically not allowed what she did. To say that whether or not jurors were affected by it is not allowed to question them that way. So what the state of South Carolina has done so far is it reflects very poorly on them. I think that we need to just move past it, though, because when we're at the second trial, we will not be focused a lot on that prosecution. It is an embarrassment to the state of South Carolina, even though it was very lucrative. It was lucrative for podcasters. It was lucrative for media corporations. It's an embarrassment to the state of South Carolina when we need to.
I agree. That is wholeheartedly at the defense of what they're going to is jury influence. And the state of South Carolina has agreed that she did say it was fleeting and foolish, which doesn't matter. Hill of Beans as it refers to the United States Supreme Court. And that's the number one issue, I think, that the justices for the state of South Carolina in the Supreme Court are going to overturn it. But we'll see.
Well, it may end up the Supreme Court. Here's the deal. I like Alan Wilson. You know, we did your good buddy, my former good buddy, Frank Santarella, and we did content. We did about an hour with Alan Wilson on a states' rights issue, which I very much agree with. And I think he's generally a very good politician. And he has a grasp of, he has a reverence for the Constitution. But he stepped in something with this prosecution. It is never too late to say, I made a mistake, and that's what he did. And of the many mistakes that were made, that narrative spun by media, and here's an example of media that we might be talking about. That narrative spun by media is an embarrassment to Alan Wilson. He needs to just own up to it and say, you know, we got swept up in this hysteria and we got it wrong, and we're going to get it right. How do you make a wrong right? You admit that it was wrong and you go forward and do it right.
Yeah, you know, but it's an election year, so it's a big chance he's going to take. But he also has to remember that the American people have a very bad memory. And the gubernatorial election is not until what, 26. I mean, Nancy Mace probably won't forget it, but he can come back and say, listen, we made the mistake. He was in jail anyways. I get it, but we made the mistake. We've rectified and we've corrected that mistake. By the way, I have given them a mountain of evidence to point them in the correct direction in which who were the people that actually did the crime of Paul and Maggie. Lord, I hope they pay attention. And one of the things that I gave them, in fact, when I talked to Jim and Dick, was the cell phone evidence, which is, you know, if you remember, old Creighton Waters standing there doing his opening statement, he pulled his cell phone out and he's standing there holding it. That this thing is going to be important. You're going to understand more about cell phone evidence than you care to. Well, okay, I understand that, but there's some things that the state covered, and then there's some things that the state did not cover as it concerns Alex Murdaugh. And the biggest one, in my opinion, and I've done countless videos on this and stories about it, is the 90544. This is Paul and Maggie have now passed. It's 90544, and the real killer of Paul is sitting there bloodied with blood and brain matter all over him, and he's sitting there on the corner side of the hangar where the driveway ends and the grass starts, and he sees his buddy coming in from Moselle Road, and he drives down the gravel road, and he pulls around, does a U-turn where all the tire tracks are seen by all law enforcement, but the dummies never take any pictures of it. And he goes around, grabs the guns, and he picks up her phone, and he jumps into the truck, and that's 90544. And 6 seconds later, they're out on Moselle Road. And then at 90612, Alec calls Maggie because he thinks, or he wants to call Maggie because he's leaving. He's out in the front yard. And then at 90612, he's like, oh, wait, no, that's them. And he hangs up and he's like, no, take that back. That's not them. Calls her right back at 90614. And at 90620, 36 seconds after 90544, her phone is physically rotated. So you kind of go from a horizontal to a portrait mode. And so this change occurred, this physically rotation of her phone occurred while Alex was calling her. Okay. Yet during this exact moment in time, exact moment, not a few seconds before, not a few seconds later, at the exact time, Maggie's phone recorded no steps. Not a half step, not a single step, not a step, period. But guess whose phone was recording steps?
Ding, ding, ding. Alex's. Here's a picture of Alex, by the way, one to memorialize. But yeah, so Alex he physically couldn't have Maggie's phone with him which is central to the prosecution's case. Again, game over, stick a fork in it, it's done. They got it wrong. For a lot of
you would think so. That jury, I mean, the SLED's own witness admitted that if one person possessed both phones at the same time, then both phones would have registered steps.
100%.
Period. End of paragraph.
Exactly.
This is called reasonable doubt.
It is indeed.
So, but then you've got the defense expert testified that the orientation change occurred precisely when Maggie's phone was tossed out alongside Moselle Road, and that's a half mile from the kennels. And when you look at the OnStar data, locks the timeline, the telematics on the OnStar show that Alex passed that location where Maggie's phone was tossed at 9:06:20. He passed it at 9:08:36. Well, listen, you can't be in two places at one time, and you can't have two things that are completely different be the truth about the same thing happening.
And he didn't go out, toss it, turn around, come back, and then go out again. I mean, it physically, he's not.
Couldn't have.
Two other people are the killer. I think what we need to think about, though, is why were they there?
And her phone went dark for 96 seconds before he drove by.
Right, right. This is a no-brainer that Alec is not the killer. You have a strong theory about who is the killer. You and I have discussed it. You're cautious about it, and I think it's appropriate to be cautious about it because people have a right to a defense and that sort of thing. But I'm thinking more and more that there's a third person that is a terrific little schemer that might have been more of the genesis of all of this than we realized. And that third person is related to one of the two people that you're concerned about, that you identify.
Yeah.
And, you talked about this whole group of individuals, the boat brats and all of them being dated or related. You
Correct.
have delved into those relationships. I don't think other pretend journalists never did. They wholesale bought a narrative and never looked beyond it. Truly never did.
Even when I try to explain how everyone is connected down there to Jim and Dick, Dick didn't understand it. Jim looked like he understood more of it than Dick did, but Dick was like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, you're thinking like a guy who's been practicing law for 50 years. You got to stop that. And I know that's going to be hard for you to do, but they're all related or dated.
These kids that age did drugs, maybe were involved in the sale and distribution of drugs. I'm just talking about kids in general.
Yeah.
We have lots of evidence of these kids partying, certainly abusing alcohol. Some of them had been arrested for DUIs. They're sophisticated young adults. And all of a sudden in media, they're sanitized as, Eagle Scouts and I don't know, some sort of female equivalent of that they were something other than what they were.
Yeah, they were the victims of the good old boy network of the Murdaugh's power plays.
Under this evil Paul Murdaugh, and only Paul, when the person that Paul was partying with was those kids, among other things. And they're very deeply connected. And there's a culture down there. You go to your grave with the secrets that your little tribe has. You don't tell, you don't rat each other out, and you don't turn on each other necessarily. But there's a sort of a tribal bond that I don't think media ever even remotely understood, much less investigated in any way. And I think that what was going on that night at Moselle is the true untold story in all of this. And unfortunately, what happened was this media, and this is, by the way, this is from my old set, and this is about Fitz News. And Eric Bland gave an interview. He used to be a big buddy of Will Folks. And he gives an interview where he calls Fitz News the cat's ass of journalism. And what Eric meant, I believe, was it's the cat's meow or the cat's pajamas. Sometime after World War II, Mickey Rooney and Hollywood, whatever, there was a phrase about if something was really good or cool or whatever, it was the cat's meow, it was the cat's pajamas. And Eric Bland, for some reason, had that in his mind in this interview with Will Folks, and he screwed it up and he meant to be complimenting Fitz News, and he called him the cat's ass of journalism. And so I just
don't
made up.
remember that, but
Well, okay, so but
was he wearing the cow? Was he wearing the cow outfit when he said that?
No, he wasn't. But Eric has never missed an opportunity to be on camera. That's for sure. But I always thought he was kind of an idiot. But he's more than that. He's more calculating than that. And I think that when you look back at these kids, we were very gullible and naive to believe that they were gullible and naive. They aren't. They were very sophisticated, very experienced, and I think very calculating young adults. I don't think that they were morally mature, but they were certainly physically mature. And I think their life experiences would rival, I've lived an interesting life, but I can't even relate to some of their normative behavior. Anyway, I think that the story is about them and about that narrative, how it was created, who fueled it, how it was perpetuated. That's the story here. And Alan Wilson doesn't want to be on that side of this prosecution because it's an example of media getting it terribly, terribly wrong. And this gets back to something that's important. Why you, Jim, are doing this kind of content. And I think it's because you care about the truth. You've never had an agenda to promote one side or the other. You follow a story where the story leads and where the facts and where your investigation leads. It's the only reason I do content with you or even take my time to be part of this. And it's why you're doing this. You care about the truth, and we don't know the truth. We were gullible and naive. We believed a narrative. Part of it is
I did believe the narrative. I believed that narrative. I thought he was guilty as sin. And then I sat down. I'm like, oh, this trial is going to be like slam dunk. And then I started watching the trial. I'm like, none of this is adding up to what I was told. What's going on here? The trailer doesn't match the movie
at all.
No.
No, the trailer did not match the movie. I came from a different perspective. I thought it would be a slam dunk that he would be acquitted because I thought their evidence was very weak. I actually quoted, she didn't name me, but your good buddy, Dana Kennedy, had interviewed a certain opening article
hey,
saying
Dana.
That what?
I said, hey, Dana, if you're listening.
Yeah, and that's another 20. What do I owe you every time I say your name?
It just keeps piling up. I know.
It keeps piling up, and the checks.
You're going to be having to wash. You're going to be washing dishes for a long time.
Yeah, don't count on that. But anyway, but anyhow, that I said that Dick was doing cartwheels to have this jury, and that it was clear Dick was pushing to get the trial going as soon as possible. And I get to mean that he knew how strong the defense case was, and Jim is supposedly this superb legal talent, and that he knew they were going to win this. And instead, so while you're sitting there saying that the trailer doesn't match the movie, I'm sitting there thinking the reputation, the myth about this defense, these fabulous defense attorneys, doesn't match the hype.
Yeah.
And then I listened to other supposed legal experts and people like Nancy Grace and whatever, and I thought, this is just a carnival. They're all carnival hucksters, and it's an affront to any semblance of justice to watch that whole show. It was just bizarre.
Yeah.
I think that in the second trial, we're going to look at it differently. Everybody's going to look at it differently. But those people, opinions once formed are very difficult to change. So people that think he's guilty are going to think he's guilty regardless of the evidence.
Right.
That's their right. I'm not going to argue with them. But for some people, they may look at this and say, hey, this never did make sense, and it doesn't make sense now. But your investigate what you have found out needs to be part of his defense.
Well, that's coming. That's coming. But I'm looking at the phone data again. By the way, for those who go to my website, I just added today. I'm going to see if this works. I'm going to be mad if it doesn't. I just added voice to text, so you don't have to read any of my articles any longer. You can listen to them, and I guess you can highlight something and have it. Let's see if it does it. I'm going to push the button here. I just highlighted this, and what's it say? It's working. It's thinking. It's awful slow.
Alex was not in possession of Maggie's phone when it was thrown.
Oh, snap. It worked. Alex was not in possession of Maggie's phone when it was thrown at 9:06:20. So
Jim,
I love
change the voice to a man.
Yeah. Okay.
It's just my preference. I don't like that. I'm picky about that kind of thing. Never mind. Do what you want to do. You know, you've been pretty successful without my input or by ignoring me completely, one or the other.
So they say if the phone had been thrown from the vehicle moving 42 miles an hour, the screen absolutely would have illuminated, but it did not. Therefore, Alex could not have been the person to throw the phone. Somebody else did. It's just as simple as that. This is not guesswork. It's physics and recorded data. So I don't know why the prosecution didn't discuss this. Do you?
No, I don't know why the defense didn't discuss it.
Well, that too. I mean, I know why the prosecution. Did I say defense? I meant prosecution. And then here's the state's rebuttal experiments was not science. Remember this guy, Paul McGanigal? He was with the
spent the week in a phone around the room. What I like is that Philip Barber said, "You understand about the scientific method," and the guy says, "Yeah." Okay, the scientific method. What you do has to be, first of all, recorded, but it has to be something you could replicate. Has to be disproven. Has to be verifiable. Your results. He didn't do.
Well, the worst part about it is that prior to this testimony by McGanigal, prior to this, he had been an expert witness before during the trial, and the defense labeled him as an expert witness. And then he comes back up and they're like, wait a minute, he's not an expert witness. And judge was like, too late, you already said he was. And they were like, well, yeah, for this, not for this. And Newman wouldn't allow it. But
that was Philip Barber's objection, that this because what this witness actually said was, Philip Barber asked him, "Are you an expert about what you've just testified to?" And he said no. Philip said, "You don't know more than just anybody. You simply threw this phone around the room." He said yes.
Yeah, he recorded nothing. He measured nothing. He relied on no methodology.
None at all. So Philip,
and that's not forensic science, as you know. That's a demonstration of how far the state's going to reach to make this timeline work.
But no, wait. But Philip turns to Judge Newman, who I imagine was asleep. I thought he was a boob. I called him Boob Newman. You know, people that were invested in this crazy narrative just couldn't sing his praises enough. I thought the guy was an idiot. But anyway, so Philip says to the judge, based upon this expert just now admitting he is not an expert about this, I ask that this testimony be stricken. And Newman says, on what basis? And Philip had just said, based upon the fact that this witness says he's not an expert, he doesn't know more than just anybody knows about throwing a phone around the room. I asked, so Philip looks at Newman like, my thought was he had to be thinking, this is about the stupidest judge I've ever been in front of. But Newman overrode Philip Barber's objection and said, no, this testimony is just fine. It's not fine. I thought then that was grounds for appeal right then, because that testimony, that ruling by Newman wouldn't withstand appellate review. But it's a perfect example. In fact, I have video, it's still on Rumble, of me just laughing. It was so outrageously idiotic. I started laughing in my coverage of it, and you can hear me laughing on the video of it. But that was what happened again and again and again. And then for people to come away they're standing on this rock of jello. There's virtue signaling about how it's right to convict Alex Murdaugh this way. No, it wasn't. A miscarriage of justice harms all of us. Would you like to be Alec and having to defend yourself against this tsunami of sheer stupidity generated by media that had a vested interest in the outcome of the trial? A dollar amount of vested interest. It wasn't just Becky Hill. There were attorneys that were allowed to influence the prosecution that had civil cases, open civil cases, that had millions of dollars invested in the perception, the certification, basically, of the myth that Alec was the head of this evil empire. It was so corrupt. The prosecution should never have allowed anybody with a dollar amount interest in the outcome of the criminal trial within 1,000 feet of the prosecution's case. And
they were texting him every day.
Texting him every day. Yeah. It is such a miscarriage of justice. That's the story. That's the book. Yeah. That's the book nobody wrote, but they will.
Well, here's number 4, the firearms. That one's funny. I did an in-depth article on the firearms and the raincoat evidence, never actually linked to Alex. I'll make it quick, but we can look at the tool mark testimony. Excuse me. And the tool mark, they're referring to the tool marks on the ejected shells of the 300 blackout that were near the house, collected by sled, and near Maggie's body. And they said that when they tested the ejection patterns, that they tested to be an error rate of 1%. So you're thinking, wow, that's 99% that this is really the true shells that came from the same thing. So it is a Murdaugh gun. But the problem with that is that the American Firearm Testing Engineering Group that does these tool mark things, they did the test the wrong way, and they didn't classify, I think it was some of the ones that just were I don't even know I'm trying to think of here, but it was flawed. And American Scientific proved that their testing was flawed, and it went from 1% to 36%. So now you have a 36% chance of being wrong instead of a 1. So that toss that out. And then you've got the blue raincoat, which, geez, come on, people. Well, how many months after the murders did they find this blue raincoat stuffed in his parents' closet somewhere and went, it's got gunshot residue on it. It must have been the guns it must have been the raincoat that he packed the guns in, that Miss Shelley saw him take upstairs, and he hid the guns. That's complete. How does evidence work? How does evidence work?
Totally fabricated. It made no sense. People testify for all kinds of reasons.
That's like going down to Dallas right now, behind the grassy knoll, and go, oh, look, there's a footprint. I bet that's the guy who shot Kennedy.
Of course it is. Of course, Creighton Waters would say, of course it is, and then Fitz News would do a story on it. Yeah, it is.
So they tested the blue raincoat, which did test positive for GSR gunshot residue, but no witness ever identified that raincoat as belonging to Alex, or even being one that they saw him carrying, including Miss Shelley, because she said it was a tarp, a blue tarp, TARP.
Confused. When I walk out the door and it's raining, I either put on a canvas tarp or a raincoat, because I get them confused all the time. They fit the same.
I have a tarp, and it's over my wood pile. I mean, it's not something I wear around my neck.
Really?
So this is a suggestion. It's not proof, but somehow the jury thought, that seems to be proof for me.
Did Mark Tinsley donate $1,000 to a GoFundMe page for a witness?
Yeah, Miss Shelley, the one who said it was a blue tarp, and then John Metters tried to say, oh no, it's a raincoat, right? And she started crying. He's like, why are you crying? Because you're making me say this crap.
She's crying because anybody questioning her is terrifying to her. That's
Yeah.
why she's crying. That doesn't make anything she's saying true. I think that she should have been politely excused from the stand. I didn't find her credible at all. Not at all. But the idea of paying her, donating $1,000 to her after her testimony, that's what Tinsley did. Then I think he kind of changed the payment to make it seem like it was an anonymous payment, something like that. Anyway, that's just bad form. But I didn't find her believable. I'm sure she's a nice woman. I think that she would say anything that somebody in a position of power asked her to say. If you said the world is flat and right, up is down and down is up, she would say yes. She would agree with you because she's basically terrified of being questioned. And I think a lot of people are, and most especially on the stand. But what I was surprised about is Dick Uphold had to know that. Jim Griffin had to know that. I didn't think that they cross-examined her very well. And I think that this is a time when racism has an odd impact on things. We don't, if she had been white, we would have pushed harder. The defense probably would have pushed harder at her inconsistencies in what she had said. And they would have nullified her any evidentiary value from her testimony. But because
Yeah,
she
the only
black,
reason the prosecution had her on there is because she was there talking about the blue tarp. But what I thought about her testimony was interesting is how calm she said. Even though she said Alex was fidgety, but Alex was always fidgety. He was fidgety at that trial. He's just a fidgety dude. But for someone who allegedly, just massacred his family, fairly calm guy. He's not crying. He's not shaking. He's not flipping out. He just laid down next to his mother and put his head down there. That seems a little.
yeah, that's kind of hard to do. We're supposed to, I don't how we're supposed to process that. But the first time I heard Alex's voice was they released the 911 call. They released it almost immediately after the murders. I think
Mhm.
and on that, you can see that he's hysterical. He's absolutely hysterical. And I think he's also on drugs. I
Yeah.
think that,
Well, he said he was.
yeah, and he was. And I don't think that took a rocket science. This is what I think is so odd. This community where there's all these drugs in the community, people selling them. I assume that they're selling them to people that are using them. And yet everybody is just sort of ignorant about the impact of drugs, like that it makes you kind of neurotic and paranoid and hyper and different things. All of a sudden, nobody had any experience with drugs and no tolerance for it or no understanding of it. If I listen to the 911 tape that Alec made, he's a guy on drugs that is seeing something extraordinarily traumatic that he can't process. And I think that the narrative that made sense to me was he, in that moment, is hysterical because he's on drugs and he feels like his drug use has gotten his wife and his son killed.
Yeah.
That got spun into that's evidence of his guilt. No, it's evidence that he has the ability to feel remorse, that he has the ability to feel, he's not a narcissist. He feels and he's aware. He has a conscience that says, I'm aware that my drug use is part of why my son and my wife are now dead. I cannot imagine, Paul's brains were blown out of his head. They hit the ground before he did.
Yeah.
And Maggie was just shredded. Her body was just shredded. Seeing that savage, brutal way of killing, I can't imagine how long it would take a human being to recover from that trauma. And I thought it was odd that Jim Griffin allows Alec to be interviewed that night. Like, it was after midnight by the time David Owen. Who was that woman in the back seat? There was Jim, Alec, David.
She was a Hampton. I think she was with Hampton County. I don't know if she was SLED, but I think she was Hampton County.
Anyway, I would never have let her. I would have said, my client No
That
shame.
wasn't Jim Griffin. That was one of his law partners. I forget his name, but yeah, that was just
Mark,
a law partner.
Mark Ball. Oh, it's
No, it wasn't Paul.
Danny Henderson.
It was Henderson, yeah.
It just seems like, a law school 101. When
I don't think Henderson was a criminal attorney. I think he was a
I
civil,
don't
but either
care,
way.
no, it anyway. If you've ever taken even a constitutional law class, you don't let, rule number one, tell your client to shut up. And so, of course, you want to be represented by an attorney, but in that instance where he is so stressed and so emotional, I'm very critical of an attorney that let him be interviewed then by SLED. They should have said, let's interview him when he's had a chance.
Right.
Give him a day or two, because there's nothing you're going to gain now. You go out and collect all the forensic evidence. He's going to give you everything. You want his shirt, you want whatever. He's giving that to you. He's giving you access to the house and the property, but don't take a statement from him. That was just about the stupidest thing in the world.
Yeah.
And we just could go through this piece by piece and say, media was, I think, corrupt. I used to think they were just idiots and greedy, but I don't think so much anymore. Now I think that there was an element of sheer corruption in that narrative that media was pushing. I'm not saying everybody in media, but I think that some people, for sure. And I think that law enforcement was kind of dumb. And I think that Alex's legal counsel, how could I put this nicely? They were just dumb as a box of rocks. And he could have done better. Remember the PR team that he had that for some reason allowed John Marvin and Randy to go on one of those morning talk shows?
Oh, yeah.
Where they say we don't have any knowledge of anybody that would want to hurt us, except that Randy's daughter had been raped 2 months before the murders. And the rapist was caught. He intended to kill her. He was stalking her and intended to kill her. We don't know why, but raping her was just an impulsive afterthought. And she got away. She was stark naked. She ran out of the building. She's alive today because she ran away. And then she went to live in Paris. How many of the Murdaugh family live in Paris?
I don't know.
But, so anyway, but Randy's sitting there at that interview being asked, gee, anything else come to mind? And that doesn't. I don't know why interview. I don't know why anybody said it was a good idea for anybody in that family to go on to give any interviews.
Right. So I think the takeaway from this whole brief that they filed is pretty clear. Is that you take away the taint and reasonable doubt floods back in, where the phone and the vehicle data prove that Alex did not dispose of Maggie's phone, period, end of paragraph. Do not argue with me on it. The state's rebuttal evidence was not scientific when it comes to tossing the phone around. You've got the firearms evidence failed to tie any weapon to Alex with a failure rate of 36%. That does not tie anybody to anything. You've got no witness ever connected GSR positive raincoat to Alec whatsoever. And there's reasonable doubt on every essential element of the state's case. I mean, Myra Crosby, juror 785, she had it right. He's not guilty. He didn't do it. But who did? And I want to play something here for you in just a second. I'm gonna stop sharing this particular screen. By the way, there's the inside of Alex's Suburban. If you look at all the Coke cans, see, as far as Maggie's phone goes, let's say he certainly didn't put it in his center console. I mean, look, you got Kentucky Fried Chicken, you got a Coke can there, you got another can, you got a bag of something. Looks like he's got a bottle of aspirin or whatever that is there. Like, there's no room to put it there. I don't get it. I think the jury tampering is going to overturn this particular case. But there is an interesting interview that SLED did with Buster Murdaugh.
Go.
Yeah. Okay.
You brought it up last time, a week ago, Wednesday, when we did this. And then you sent me the clip on Sunday night when I'm asleep at 7:00. Anyway, So I listened to it
I give you a
about
hard time for me to sleep at 7 o'clock, but what time do you get up in the morning?
2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Okay, but I'm still on that like daylight losing time or whatever. My body is all screwed up. I admit that. Okay, so the link you sent was more clear than the one I remembered. For people listening to that link, I hope that you heard the jailhouse conversations between Alec and Buster, and then you remember Buster on the stand when he testified.
Yeah. So this is what, 3 days? This interview we're going to listen to, just a little clip of. This was 3 days after the murders of his mother and his brother. Let me get this pulled up on screen. Share screen. There it is.
Buster, what do you think? What do you make of all this? Like,
What do you mean, what do I make about it?
of all this with your mom and your brother?
Okay. I want to break this down. Of all this with your mom and your brother. Okay. There's a woman in the back seat. She's with Sled. She's asking him about this with your mom and your brother.
Do you think maybe someone was after your brother and your mom happened to be down there? Like what is...
I would say if I
Someone was after your brother and your mom just had to be down there.
had to have a take, that's probably what it would be.
Yeah.
I think that someone was probably trying to kill my brother, and that my mom was probably just there.
Do you think that was because of the boat?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, he said, do you think that's because of the boat? And he immediately went to yes. Okay. But wait, here it
And
comes.
I'm sorry for asking that, but
Okay.
you know, y'all knew
I'm
that
sure
better
you thought
than
of little
anybody.
else. I mean, to some degree.
Now they stop. They know what's coming next. This is clear policing 101. They've already set up how they're going to interrogate him. And now here's the big silence, right? So we got that out of the way. Silence. Silence. Just making them sit. Just making them sit. Silence.
Is there any other possibilities you've considered?
Oh, here it comes. Is there any other possibilities you could consider?
No, sir.
Nope. Oh. Silence. Silence. Here it comes.
I want to ask you about something, and I want to preface this by saying this is based purely on rumor, and it's not something we're investigating as an agency, but it's the incident with the
Yes.
Smith family.
Smith family.
You familiar with what I'm talking about?
I am. Say it again, please. I missed
The
that.
Smith family.
Okay.
The boy that
Right. I
got
got it.
out.
I got it. I knew it is.
Has anything about that incident come into play in terms of threats, in terms of your thoughts on this incident, in terms of in any faction? Is there any part of that, rumors you've heard, accusations, any threats you've had related to that?
Well, he says any threats you've had to any of that, but he talks about the incident. And the incident he's referring to is the death of Paul and Maggie. Any threats of any kind as it concerns Paul and Maggie. He should have just stopped there, but he didn't. He kept going.
No, sir. Is there anything you want to elaborate on that? I mean,
He said, no, sir. And his next follow-up is there anything you want to elaborate on that? I mean, policing 101. I love it.
has anyone ever questioned you about that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've read the articles and the rumors and saying that, you know, I've had people understand to think that that's what I did, and I've had people message me and stuff and call me a piece of shit and a murderer and a faggot and things like that. But I've never received a what you call it, a form.
The question wasn't about you, Buster, although it was at the end. The question was about your brother and the incident.
Threat.
Huh?
He's never been questioned. Buster was not questioned in July of 2015. He wasn't questioned in February of 2019 about the boat brat case. This is the first time law enforcement is questioning him, and he knows exactly what they're talking about. and he thinks they're talking about him.
Yes,
Even right.
he does. Yes, he does.
You're right. They're talking about
Paul.
the death of Paul and Maggie and the death of Stephen Smith.
And then the guy's like, or you.
That is this is the most interesting video. You know, you produce a lot of interesting stuff. You make us take a second look at things. This video is one of the most interesting videos you've produced. There are 4 people in that car. All 4 of them have an interesting story to tell that we don't really understand. Well, the one we probably understand the most is law enforcement.
Yeah.
They're lying to him to manipulate him to either involve himself or involve his dad. They're kind of poking around. They're clumsy, and frankly, they reveal more about what they know that they obviously never followed up on than we realized.
I still don't know what they found at, investigating something on Paul's computer. I don't know. Let's see.
And I haven't heard a lot about it in a while either.
It's pretty much died off.
I would say that, yes.
For him.
You say messaging, I mean, this is like social media messaging, or
Yeah,
text
this
messaging,
would be Facebook. And Facebook, I think I got a couple off of Instagram as well.
Did you receive any of those kind of messages after the boat incident?
I did. Very similar. But again, never a formal
Here's
threat.
the important questions coming up.
Anyone you ever recognized?
Anyone you ever recognized?
No, sir. Never anybody that I knew who they
There's
were.
the first important question.
Did you ever do any kind of looking to see if they were somebody who might have at least been, if nothing else, geographically able to carry out a threat or something like that?
Geographically able to carry out a threat. Did it happen after the boat crash? And still talking about Stephen Smith, not talking about the boat crash, talking about Stephen Smith. And anybody geographically able to carry out a threat.
Like a neighbor,
Like a friend.
I don't know, half a mile of you, a mile.
Somebody who lived 4 minutes away.
Yeah. How did we miss that? But
because the guy was talking in these vague terms, the way cops do, and trying to get you to talk.
I remember what the media thought about that this was proof of something. We should go back and pull up the articles, because we now know that the articles that were pivotal to the interpretation of that, we understand more about the bias of those articles. So, and I have all of those. I printed them because I was making daily content. And so I would print out every article that this group of folks published. But I think there are a lot more questions I would have asked, and especially now, except that I don't think that the killer of Paul and Maggie is in that car at all. But I think that there's things going on that we never actually understood very accurately. And since we don't have the truth, we don't really understand all the moving pieces. What's your take on it?
Well, I'm confused. So Buster took it to him what he thought about it and said, because he said I. But the way that the guy started out was, is there anything with that Smith case that has to do with this incident in your brother?
Right.
Now, what would his brother have to do with anything with Smith?
Well, you know the answer to that. So
the answer to that is that Paul knew who did it.
Yeah.
Paul knew who did it.
Yeah. But I don't think
not only did he know who did it, who I understand was best friends. The guy who did it was best friends, according to my source, was best friends with Mallory Beach's boyfriend. There's a connection for it. Related or dated.
Yeah. Or best man at a wedding. I don't know. One of those. Yeah.
Anyway, SLED has all of this, by the way, for all of you listening at home. I gave it to them all. Hopefully they're doing something with it.
There was the State Department of Natural Resources, in a case that was filed in Richland County, released the driving records of these kids and whether they'd ever been arrested for driving under the influence and that sort of thing, driving impaired, and a whole lot more about them than ever made its way to any media narrative about them. You would think that these kids were Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs or the three other dwarfs, whatever. So they were active kids doing things that we all complain that kids do. I don't want to single them out because I think that that's what those kids were doing. But they sure as hell, Paul was not the bad guy in a group of lily white, wonderful little church-going kids. Those kids associated with Paul because of the perks that they got associated with Paul. And I think that there's at least one that is a schemer, an extraordinary schemer. In fact, if you go back and look at the deposition testimony of law enforcement officers who were at the scene of the boat crash, they describe these kids very specifically, and media just ignored all of that and honed in only on that Paul was evil. No.
Right. They all did the same thing. I mean, yeah, Paul may have gotten out of this stuff, but they all went out and got drunk. They all went out and got high. They all were doing drugs. They were shooting guns. They were shooting at signs. They were hauling from trucks. They were all doing this. Okay, maybe not the girls, but most of the guys down there. Well, I shouldn't say that. Some of the girls probably did. And I'm not pointing anybody specifically out, but if anybody's down in the Low Country in Hampton and wants to disagree with me, contact me at crimeandcast.com.
At crimeandcast.com. I can think of a particular source, two sources that had a lot of information about the kids. That actually was a third that connected with me, and I tried to connect her with you, and she passed away before you had a chance to talk to her. But she knew a lot of stuff. And there are other people that contacted me. There's just, the thing is, there's more to this story, but some of it doesn't have to be public. People have a right to their private life that doesn't relate, if a beloved family member was murdered, that doesn't give anybody the right to pry, to crawl up somebody's tailpipe and pry into their private life. So I'm not trying to do that, and I never wanted to do that.
Yeah.
But I don't think we ever had an accurate assessment of what in the world we were dealing with at all. You're right about this. All three were connected. The death of Stephen Smith, the boat brat case, and the murders of Paul and Maggie. They're connected.
It's all connected.
And we don't truly understand it. And then there's so much. There had to be a lot of gentlemen agreements to say, we're not going to talk about this and we won't talk about that. Like at the trial, nobody talked about the jailhouse conversation between Alex and Buster, where they talk about Butch Bauer taking $60,000 as a bribe to bribe the dean of the South Carolina School of Law to readmit Buster after he had flunked out. And Buster's complaining that he wants to be readmitted with a clean slate and a higher GPA than he actually deserved. So, there are aspects to all of this that just, it's like both the prosecution and the defense said, we're not going to talk about Alex's drug use, who he was supplying drugs to. There was that prostitute that was in media for a short time, talking about partying with Alec and other politicians and other attorneys and famous people and all kinds of drugs that were there at those parties.
Yeah, I'm going to try to get a hold of her, by the way.
Well,
I don't think the interview that was done with her was very good. But I'm going to go.
Think way to get a hold of her now. I just thought about that. You need to go back over some of the some people that were of interest. Here's the deal. People contact you all the time, Jim.
Yeah.
Because they recognize that you care about the truth.
Right.
And that's what I wanted to get back to. Anybody that ever came to me, I apologize for letting you down. I'm not Jim. Jim has the credibility. He has the determination to go and knock on the door and get the witness testimony. I'm too scared to do that. I'll admit it.
Elaine's like, get out of there. Get out of there. What are you doing? Leave.
I'm always, get another dog, and stay home. So I'm too scared. And there are certain aspects of evil that I don't want to deal with. It's just overwhelming. And I did not understand some of these people, they're not good people doing bad things. They're evil people doing really evil things.
Right.
And you're brave and courageous, and I am not. I got enough on my plate as it is. I've seen evil up front, personal. I understand how dangerous a narcissist is. I'm not gonna jump into that at all. But I can't help but notice when things just glaringly don't make sense. So we're at about an hour. We're over an hour. 33 seconds over an hour, Jim. Is this where you have the hook and...
Can you hear the music coming in?
No, I didn't hear it last time either. I thought it was funny.
Radio crackles, stories pour like water, swamp justice.
Stop it.
Where the
I can't hear
line between.
All right. Well, the people at home can hear it. It's the theme song to Swamp Justice Radio on 97.7 FM WVFF, Veterans for Freedom Radio, the Truth in Broadcasting Corporation, coming to you live of Cottageville, South Carolina. And we are recording over the tube of the U, or they call it. Kidding. Going over YouTube. And other social medias. I'm sure it's going to go out on Facebook and all these other places, and I'll tag you on it. But yeah, if people want to get in touch with me, Elaine's contacts, feel free. I'm at crimeandcast.com. You can check me out on TikTok. I am all over the place. Hey, and you know what? Guess what? This is what I thought was great. My first book, Defending Alex Murdaugh, Not Guilty by Reasonable Doubt, is back climbing up the ladder again. I'm number 5 in criminal evidence. Criminal evidence, number 5.
Good job, Jim.
And back up there.
Well, you know so much more. Really, you need to do, the
Another
sort
book? I'm going to do another book.
Yeah.
I'm going to do the after book. I don't know, what should we call it instead of Defending Alex Murdaugh?
I don't know if we call it, what is it, True Justice? What's that?
Swamp Justice.
No, I know. You came up with Swamp Justice. And didn't I hear a little birdie told me somebody else has now? It's almost like they plagiarized, like they were copying you. I don't know why I get this feeling.
There's another justice out there, and I thought, well, the timing of that is interesting.
It's just interesting. It is interesting. I'm sure it's just a coincidence, too, because they're so creative over there.
Yeah.
Okay, so take us out, Jim.
All right, 97.7 FM on YouTube. This is Swamp Justice Radio with Elaine Greenwood, Swamp Justice Radio, and Super Woke News. Check her out on X. And you still have a bunch of stuff on Rumble, right?
I just haven't taken it off. It's fine. It just is there. It is what it is.
If you're on Rumble, go check her out. What are you on? What's your name on? Are you Super Woke News on the Rumble?
No, it's probably Elaine Greenwood. I had 2 channels on Rumble. I think Elaine Greenwood, the Rumble channel on Elaine Greenwood has maybe 40 or 50 videos, but I haven't updated it since, for a long, long time, maybe years.
Right.
But it kind of stands the test of time. You certainly know where I stand on things like Mark Tinsley and Eric Bland, and no question. So,
all right, we're going to go. We'll talk about this off air. 97.7 FM, you got it. We'll see you later on Swamp Justice Radio.